Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I am thrilled to have Ed Delia here today from Delia Associates. Ed, thank you so much, first of all, for helping me pronounce your last name. Because I was like, is it Delia? Is it Delia? You're like, no, it's Delia. So I think that's something that's really important. And I'm just really thrilled to have you here to talk about all things B2B.
Great to be with you, Anika. Thank you so much.
Of course. It seems like you must have always known that you were going to go into the family business, because when I looked through your LinkedIn and your different profiles, you have worked in B2B pretty much your whole career. I mean, you have your LinkedIn group, and then you're the second generation of your family business. So I'd love to hear about that, because I don't think that's a story we hear often these days.
Oh, okay. So interestingly, I have a dear friend from college. So I went to Dickinson College, so it's a small school. And he reminds me sometimes, even to this day, that we were standing next to each other in line to receive our diplomas on graduation day. And I said to him, his name is Mike. I said, Mike, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do next, but I'll be damned if I go to work for my old man.
Oh, wow.
So needless to say, a few months later, I'm turning down a job offer outside of Philadelphia to set my sights on the family business, to come into the family business and learn it, and then eventually go through a buyout process with my dad, who then retired. So yeah, I really didn't have my sights set on it, but as I look back across, when you grow up around a family business, you sort of absorb the family business. And you know, I was collating press kits when I was 7 years old. I think I wrote my first press release when I was 15. You know, I was going on video shoots and photography shoots when I was 12 and 13, and helping out with setting up sets and setting up trade show booths when I was in my late teens, media analysis. So not thinking that this is all going to, you know, come to fruition somewhere, just thinking that it's kind of what you do. You know, when you're a family business, you step in and you help out. And it was fun, you know. Yeah, so then took the plunge, I guess, in August of 95. I started full-time officially at Delia Associates.
What made you say, yes, okay, I just graduated, I'm not going to go in the family business, and then what created that really quick pivot for you?
So at the time, I had watched one of my older brothers have a very successful career, and he just sold his business for a very large multiple, and his path was sales. So I said, I think I may take a liking to that too, because I'm very similar to my brother in many respects. And that was really the path I was going down. So back in 95, the hot sales career was pharmaceutical sales. So that's really where I was kind of setting my sights on. And then my dad and I kind of had one of those heart-to-hearts, you know, where we were talking about the business. And then he sort of said to me at the end of the conversation, well, let me know soon, because I've got 3 people that are interested in buying the business if you're not interested in coming in.
Oh, a little pressure.
So I actually got together with some recent grad college friends over that particular weekend, and I was kind of taking stock of what I was thinking to do and what they were doing. A lot of them were either taking very low-level jobs or some of them going back to school. So, you know, I said, all right, I'm about to take this kind of lower-level job in sales. I'm also about to pass up on the opportunity for business ownership, you know, in the family business. So I was 22 years old, and I was like, well, how many 22-year-olds have that proposition in front of them? I think I would be remiss if I didn't give it a try. So that was my pivot. But I said, all right, Dad, let's do it. And I often tell people that are, not surprisingly, a lot of our clientele are family businesses, multi-generation. We sort of have a kinship, but I often tell people that are contemplating that a good early indicator, at least for me, was when you kind of look up and the day is over, and you wonder where it went. So when time flies, you're usually in a good place. When you're looking at the clock and saying, get me out of here, this day is dragging, I can't wait to go home, probably not a good place. But when time flies and, you know, you're totally engaged and immersed in what you're doing, you don't even realize that it's, you know, sometimes I look up, it was 8 o'clock. I'm like, why am I starving? Oh, because I haven't eaten and it's 8 o'clock, you know, at night. And that's usually a good indicator, a good sign that you're in the right place. So.
How wonderful. And do you have anybody that you're going to pass the family business on to who might be interested? Do you see any of your, if you have kids or, you know, family, nephews, nieces?
So I have twins. They're 19 in their first year of college. I think their interests might lie elsewhere, but I could also honestly tell you that I thought my interests lied elsewhere as also, and I did make that pivot. So I'll never say never, but if they don't, that's okay.
Yeah. Your company is a full service firm, which I think is so important these days because of the world we live in. We have to know what each piece of marketing or sales is doing. And so your agency is now full PR, advertising, digital growth strategy, marketing, brand strategy, all of that in one. How did you help shape that transformation? And knowing that you joined in 1995, but the company had already been around for a while, what changes have you seen and what have you seen stay the same? So I know that's like a three-part question.
Yeah. So when my dad founded the business in 1964, and, for a good number of those years, it was a traditional, I'll call it more of a B2B advertising and PR firm. So those were but then, back then, the channels of communication in the B2B landscape were fairly fixed. You had trade advertising, you had PR, you had a lot of trade show and conference and event activity, and then some direct marketing, let's say. So back then, there was no web, there was no social, there was no digital, there was, email marketing was in its fledgling state. And as I came into the business, I think it was around the time when the commercialization of the web was kind of happening for companies. And I think we did our first website build probably in 1997 or 6, so not too long after I had come on board. And, around that time, I was kind of puzzling, like, why are these companies almost reimagining their brands when they go online, changing their logos, changing their colors, changing their messaging? Like, that doesn't seem to make sense. Are they not the same company? And if they are, there must be something in their brand that they don't like, or else why would they be changing it? So it occurred to me that in the B2B landscape at the time, there wasn't really an appreciation for what the idea of brand means or the value of brand building. A lot of them would say, well, we're a supplier to brands. The consumer brands that's where branding lives. It doesn't live in the B2B realm. And I disagreed. And I said, I think it should. And I think there's a great value when it does. And I'm a big fan of staying in a state of wonder and asking questions. So I wonder what it would look like if I could build a system for developing B2B brands. And that's really where the brand leadership was born, which is our flagship. And we also have a patent on the process document, which we awarded in 2011, although the platform had been in existence since, I think our first utilization of a fledgling form of it was probably in 1999 or 2000. So really my passion was brand and brand building. And, as I started to chart the success of clients that followed that platform, taking companies from, the smaller ones, say from 4 million to 20 million, from 10 million to 50 million, from 90 million to 180 million, and seeing that a lot of that was on the back of, quality brand building and quality sales enablement from that brand, we recognized we were onto something,
I'm a big fan of talking about branding. I work with a lot of smaller organizations and workforce development and education sector. So very different from yours, but also brands that need to make sure that they understand what message that, what are the pain points of their consumers? And sometimes it's different because there'll be different populations of adult learners or students or local businesses. But it is so interesting to me what people get right and what people get wrong about brand. And we also see nowadays, which is something I think should always have been baked into the DNA of brand, that our younger consumers are telling us they want to see authenticity, they want to see transparency. So in your patented model, and when you've worked with all of these different companies, what have you seen be some of those markers of great B2B brands? Because that's a big distinction also from B2C, and how you've been able to help them in that process.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right, Nika. Authenticity is so key. And that is the first step. There's 4 parts to our process. The first is discover. And the first part is internal discovery. So we hold the belief that true and authentic brands are born from within, which means they have to come from the voices of the people that represent that brand every day. So it can't be me kind of whipping up something in the lab and saying, here it is. And Nika, isn't this cool? And you're like, but that's not me. That's not us. That's not who we are. Well, that doesn't do anyone any good. It's rather an exploration of who are you? Who do you uniquely serve? What's your purpose for being here? And how do you bring, tremendous and unique value, transformative value, if you will, to an audience? That's what we're looking to discover. And, by virtue of the ways and the question sets that we ask of an internal population, we get a sense of their hearts and minds and what they truly believe. And that's a really good basis for understanding the brand and how to best position the brand. Usually we can also sense when the company's at odds, right? Where different people have different positions on who they should be. That comes very clear because you'll see a very disparate set of responses. Whereas, you have a fairly aligned culture when we see all the responses are living in the same channel, if you will, right? They're all kind of coming from the same place. Okay, this is a fairly aligned team and culture, and they're kind of seeing, they're all flying in somewhat of a formation, which is healthy. I would say the other part is where I think a lot of B2B brands struggle with is the emotional factor. So a lot of times they deliver what I'll call more functional or transactional messaging. So we make this stuff if they're a manufacturer, or we engineer these things if they're in engineering, or, we provide X service if they're a consultant or a service provider. So that's functionally true of what they do, but it doesn't really tell us who they are, how they're different, and how they uniquely meet the needs of a target audience in a way that gives that audience transformative value. So that's where we often are pushing B2B brands, is to live on the emotional side of the equation and create those emotional connections. AI is a very interesting phenomenon in our industry, and we employ AI tactics, as do many, but there's still a human element, right, to a lot of the companies we serve. And I think a lot of times that's missed and shouldn't be, because I think that's really a powder keg for B2B brands. They can deliver that emotional connection and make that emotional connection and have all the capability, firepower behind it to deliver on it. That's a real win-win.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when you move from a place where everybody is aligned with your culture and your values in an organization, or even just personally, everything is it's so much easier to make decisions about, is this somebody we want to work with? Yes, no. Do they match our culture? Will they be a good fit as a customer or as somebody, an investor or partner or whatever the case may be? And so many companies want to just say, here's who we, like exactly what you said, we do X, Y, Z. Okay, but great. Why do you do it? What is that story? Why did you even create this in the first place? So I could geek out on this with you because it's so vital. And so many people forget that important step of build your brand. Even if it takes a little more time and intentionality, your entire business will be so much stronger. And it sounds like you saw a lot of that in the shift to digital, where people were having almost an existential crisis over who they were, and maybe who they want to be. And they were able to re-envision this when the world of digital came about.
Yeah. So, a lot of our work was saying, let's rein it in. Let's be one brand, right? And it doesn't matter what touch point or what channel we're using to express it, but it should be common. And so for a lot of clients, sometimes, I feel like we're a bit of a hockey goalie. Like they're trying to take a shot on goal, trying to deviate. And we're like, wait a minute, let's go back to, why this was our position, why it's a distinct position, why you can own that position uniquely, and why you should stay in that position. Because when you live in that lane, you do very well. So even though there's a shiny toy over there, don't worry about it. We'll get to that shiny toy. Let's focus on what we can be and what we can uniquely be. Let's spend our energy and equity in driving that further, and building those great relationships. So that's another, I think, thing that differentiates us from a lot of firms. A lot of firms will talk about, we'll get you leads. We'll get all kinds of leads. Well, in the B2B realm, we took over from another firm, a company, a specialty manufacturer. And, they were touting, well, this firm gets us, 100 leads a month, which for a specialty manufacturer, that's pretty good for what they do. It's very niche-y. I said, but, 96 to 98 of them, you said, are not good. So what if we got 20 and 18 or 19 of the 20 were really good that you could pursue and win a good closing number on? That would be better. And that's kind of what happened. And that was their transformation realization, that we did some math. I think their leadership, certain members were taking 2, sometimes 3 days to chase after all those leads, knowing full well that, 90% of them were not good, or if not higher. So, it's really about quality over quantity. And, it's easy to get kind of fascinated by a company that says, we'll get you all these leads. Well, that sounds really good. But if they're really bad, does it really matter? So I think, sometimes people, need a little bit of coaching as to what do they really want? you want quality relationships. And that's really what we're trying to build with the brands we work on at Delia Associates.
Yeah.
A quality brand for quality relationships, for long-term relationships that are high value producing on both ends, both the recipient of the service or goods and the deliverer.
Yeah. And you have the whole integrated stack as well. Now I'm going through, I love the peso model. I'm actually doing the training on it. So the paid, earned, shared, owned media, thinking about integration. And as a full stack agency, you're able to do that. Do you find that a lot of your clients take advantage of those offers so that they'll have a PR strategy, they'll have a digital strategy all in one? Because I know sometimes people are reluctant. I've seen it, at least in workforce and education. They don't really necessarily understand the PR side of things and how that is going to help with their touch points, their thought leadership. And then we can use that for some of the other messaging.
A great question. And not every client is either in a ready position, or it could be a bandwidth thing, or it could even be just a familiarity thing where we would endorse every conceivable channel of communication. So it's really understanding the brand, understanding where their target audience resides, and then, knowing how to kind of connect the dots and put together a program that's going to engage that audience in a meaningful way and get them a result. And, making sure that the brand message is visible and present across all those, whatever the communications may be. I love our clients dearly. They're all wonderful people. They're smart people. Usually their acumen isn't brand and marketing.
Right.
That's why we exist. So, a lot of times it's both doing and educating and helping them understand, and then reinforcing things and being very humble and grateful about that, because, people like you and I, we live brand every day, right? We're immersed in it. We see it every day. Not everybody is. Some of our clients are dealing with a manufacturing line that's been down for 2 days, or, some supplier issue or a problem with getting goods or raw materials. They're dealing with that stuff. So they're not thinking brand every day. So it's our role to help them remember that this is important too.
You also mentioned AI, and that's something that I know every business needs to understand how to use, but a lot of people still don't. And so I think when people don't bring in an expert such as yourself, that's when we see a lot of the really superlative filled captions on social media that we know came from ChatGPT, right? So I'd love to hear, do you have any favorite AI tools that you utilize, knowing that AI is a tool that we use to help maybe bolster our strategy, but it certainly does not take the place of the creativity and the strategy that we as humans have.
Yeah. And there also is some legal issues relative to brand. So if I went and spun up some element of brand, whether it be a brand statement or logo or something through a ChatGPT or some other channel, there's a question as to who owns that, who owns the rights to that expression. So we have to be very careful about, when we venture into AI space. What we use it for here predominantly is something of an accelerant. So, I might use personally ChatGPT to formulate an idea, just to formulate my thinking. I will never use the verbatim of what ChatGPT endorses. Our design team uses some AI features in the Adobe platform that would maybe accelerate an element of design. So, for instance, if they're working on a composition of photo and they only had taken a shot of maybe half a house, using an AI tool to fill in the rest of the house, and then, saving them time to just do a little touch-up work on that. Because sometimes the AI doesn't always get shadows and shading quite right, but it'll build out the rest of the house, So it saved them a couple hours of time that they would have had to do that through manual tools. So, we use it as accelerants. And then we're testing some other features that, between you and me, the jury's still out on, some outbound components that we're sort of testing right now. I find them interesting, but I don't know yet how well they will work comparative to human activity. And that's really what we're measuring right now. So it's got a place. It's most certainly used here every day, but AI still needs a little help from humans, I think, to...
Yeah. And I am very appreciative of the fact that you said that you're testing out some things for outbound, but the jury's still out. Yeah. The number of times I get inbound LinkedIn requests and then I accept them and then they immediately start a sales pitch. But sometimes, a couple of times it's actually been a person, but I just thought it was AI because I was like, okay, this is just your bot. Your bot is doing this. This is not, have you read my profile? Do you understand what I really do? You probably wouldn't be trying to sell me this otherwise, right? So I love that you are testing things. I mean, and that's the phase we're in, right? We're in this phase of let's experiment, but let's also do our research and then we'll see what's actually going to stick around and what's going to work for our companies and for our clients.
Yeah. And we tend to, as a rule of thumb, I'll never endorse any tactic or marketing activity if we've not done it ourselves, explored it ourselves, tried it. I'd rather we be the test bunny and mess up in the lab or whatever than a client, just so that we can then figure out, okay, what works and what doesn't here, what's worth endorsing, what's not here. And then we can make a smarter guidance to our client and say, all right, this seems to work. We've tried it. Or, don't do that. We crashed and burned.
Yeah. And that's even for this podcast. I've tried a number of different AI tools and still tinkering, still trying to figure out which ones are really most effective in helping cut down that time of being able to create promotional material or have the right transcript. Are the names spelled correctly? Or, all the other things that we have to watch out for still.
Yeah. And the category will continue to evolve. It will evolve at I believe an accelerated pace. And it represents, I think, in our industry, the next evolution of, I'll say, the creative persona, right? Mm-hmm. So when I started in 95, and if I even go back to my upbringing, there was still truly an art and craftsmanship to the work. So, you had these big, long drafting tables, and artists would literally draw, right? If somebody misspelled a word, they would ink it out and redraw the lettering precisely to Times New Roman. And the artists were trained in typography, right, by hand, and they could do that. That skill is no longer needed, right? So then the next phase of creative had a digital tool set, and they knew tools like Adobe and Illustrator and the like. And the next evolution was being more multimedia savvy, so able to take photography, videography. All of our designers are trained in photography and videography because it's a necessity. And then getting into, an understanding of social interactivity. So I would say the next evolution of the creative is really a navigator. The tools of AI are only as good or as powerful as the prompts we give the tool. So, somebody that's working in a medium for 20 years is probably going to have better prompts than somebody that's trying out ChatGPT or another platform for the first time. They're going to ask smarter questions, better questions, and get better answers and better outcomes.
Yeah. And that brings me to the question, because with all of these tools and technology, so many people position themselves as brand experts, brand strategists, marketing experts. We can get you sales. We can create all the funnels online. And to your point, they might have learned some of the skill set, but they don't have the breadth of knowledge and the depth of knowledge of really understanding the brand and looking through case studies and thinking about it from a very different, longer-term perspective.
True, yeah. Especially, I would say, in the B2B universe. And B2B companies come in all shapes, styles, and sizes. Some are very marketing astute. Some are, that's just not their core competency, right? So it's easy to get kind of lost in the sea of different options and opportunities in terms of what they need. So we tend to kind of boil it down to what we're usually pretty sure they want. And most of them want to grow. So we'll start with that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have another module off our brand leadership platform. It's a growth strategy. So it's a growth planning tool that we use to really identify what are the most viable channels of growth and prioritize them, because we've identified 30 different channels of growth, and it's unreasonable to ask, a team to say, oh, go have at it and call me when you're done. So, you prioritize those that are relevant, and we really work towards what are the 3 to 5 channels of growth that are really going to move the needle for this organization in the next 12 to 18 months. Because once we understand that, we can work backward from that and understand, okay, what needs to happen to make that so? And now we've got the basis for a brand strategy. okay, so this is how we have to position the brand, and this is who we have to position it to. And these are probably our best channels of reach to engage those audiences with the right messaging to get them to respond and help us achieve the growth we're looking for. It also gives them a little bit of a roadmap of, what forecasting kind of an ROI on the effort would be, because at least we now know the growth we're going after, and we can kind of assign a number to, if not the actual sales dollar, the opportunity value, which is the potential proposed business we would get from this effort. And most people have, a better idea of their proposal to close ratio than trying to get an ROI from marketing to close.
Right.
That's a tricky number in the B2B world because that could be months, that could be years. The cycles of close for some of our clients are very long, so to try to measure that moment to moment doesn't really make a lot of sense. But they can measure the opportunity value. That they can do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, I'd love to hear what your industries of speciality are. And I think it's many, but there are ones that you particularly think of as your core competencies as a business.
Well, one is legacy, which is very interesting because it's the packaging business. And when I say packaging, I'm not talking about package design. I'm talking about the industry that supports consumer goods. So non-durable consumer goods has a very extensive supply chain. And we have many of those as clients, Delia Associates. That was legacy because before my father started Delia Associates, he worked for a period of time in the package research and development center for Avon products, which was, if you remember way back, Avon lady, the people that would go door to door selling cosmetics. So back in the early 60s, they were experimenting with different package formats, for cosmetics and personal products. So that's kind of where my dad was immersed in and understanding the technologies of how packaging was made and plastics were processed. So lo and behold, our early clients were in the plastics and packaging industries. And packaging to this day now, packaging comes in many formats now. It's not all just plastic. If anything, there's a lot of movement away from plastic to more recycled and sustainable materials. But nonetheless, packaging is a mainstay client category for us. Manufacturing as well, commercial construction, engineering, and then some B2B tech and service businesses. They tend to make up our client composition. B2B pharma is also an interesting one because we're in New Jersey and there's so many pharmaceutical companies and companies, attached to the pharmaceutical supply chain in and around the Great Garden State. So we have many of those. And of course, none of those I can talk about because they're all very, secretive about what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And those, gosh, because I have friends who work in pharma sales, and I know that we're waiting for this, the FDA approval, we're waiting for this approval, we're waiting for this, research study to come out before they can even start really diving into learning about the product in a much richer way and going out and starting to sell it. It can be years. So I imagine, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about being in the B2B world is they're not impacted by, say, economic turbulence as much as a consumer brand. Because if you're constructing a part for a Boeing airplane, that's not going to be done for 5 years.
Yeah.
You could have probably 3 business cycles in that time, up, down, sideways, plane's still being worked on. It's still going to get done. There's still a supply chain that's going to support its creation. So life just kind of rolls on, That was certainly true across the COVID period. All of our clients remained fully operational. In fact, a few of them got letters from the government saying you will stay operational by virtue of some of the work they were doing. So, yeah.
What continues to bring you joy in the work that you do?
I think getting a notification like we just got yesterday, one of our clients through some of our work was awarded a major win, huge opportunity. So for us, that's as thrilling as it is for the client, to see that win come through, because it's really, that ultimate validation of our work. And we'll see that fairly regularly, to see companies that are, a lot of our clients tend to be on the small to mid-size, or they're a division of a global entity in terms of size. So to see them walk in and go toe-to-toe with, some of the biggest entities in the world and win, on the basis of brand and messaging is really exciting for us.
Love stories like that. So Ed, what is next for Delia and Associates and for you?
Well, I think we're going to continue to further our immersion into more of the growth side, growth strategy. I find that as a B2B centric firm, we seem to keep moving closer and closer to the sales side of the realm. At least the lines have been very grayed in terms of what is sales and what is marketing. And that excites me because, for the same reason why we get so excited here when we hear about a client's major win, like the more that we can contribute to that win, the better as far as I'm concerned. So I think we're going to continue that immersion into the science and study of growth and ultimately enable our vision, which is to be the growth center for B2B brands, where they can come and really immerse themselves in the ideas and the concept of growth and the strategies that support growth in a somewhat organized and methodical way, as opposed to, a shoot from the hip way. And that's why we built the process, because we believe that it is just like a manufacturer makes goods. We manufacture brands here. There is a methodology that we apply that has proven to work time and again.
And to the point of that, you do have a brand leadership action plan and assessment on your website, correct? I can put the link in the show notes to delianet.com and then Delia Brand Assessment, which of course I'll spell it out in the show notes for everybody, and they can learn about your strategy and get an assessment to figure out what their holes are, what they're doing really well.
Yes, it's a very candid assessment. We'll give them a brand scoring based on what we see are the 10 key brand parameters. And then also some, very candid direct commentary about observations that we will offer up just out of the gate. So, there's a takeaway value for the assessment itself, and there's no obligation, of course. It's part of what we do. And certainly there's opportunities to talk further if there's interest. And sometimes people do, and sometimes they just really want to get an outside perspective of where they're sitting today, and that's fine too.
Yeah. It's also a good entry point. Maybe they're not ready yet, but they might be ready in the future. So
sure. Yeah. I mean, changing your brand or even revitalizing it is not typically taken lightly. So when that is on the table, there's a lot of considerations to be made. We're also, I would say, very pragmatic when it comes to the idea of rebranding or elevating the brand, and that, it would be very easy to just come in and do a makeover just because we can, because maybe we have a bigger or better vision, but it doesn't always mean we should. So if there are elements that are, and there usually are, that should be retained as part of that brand entity and brand, we'll retain them, because what we often tell, a prospect is, we're talking about revitalizing your brand, but we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because everything that you did right and good brought you to this point. And really what we're talking about is how to get to that next point. And, let's define what that is. What is the next level? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to your organization, your people? If it's a family business, what does it mean to the family? In fact, I think a lot of family business activity in our clientele is, really in the name of the continuity of prosperity. A business is done well by, maybe generation 1 and 2. They want to make sure it does well for generation 3. And it's essential for that rising generation, or if it's new leadership, to have their own vision. And, doing 10% better than my dad did is not a vision.
Yeah.
So my vision was brand and growth. And that's what I've immersed myself in. My dad's vision was different. And he's already fulfilled his, because once my uncle asked him, his name was Mike, he said, Mike, what do you hope to get from this business? And his answer was, I'd like to build something that lives beyond me.
Ooh.
So Dad passed in 2012. And
oh, goodness.
I can honestly say that he was successful in his vision. He met his mark, and Delia Associates endures now in its 60th year.
Amazing. Well, congratulations for that, for continuing his legacy. He sounds just like an amazing man and role model for you.
Thank you, Anita.
And I can see how you're the same. Do you have a favorite quote, verse, family motto, poem, just words that help you get through every day, that inspire you?
I have several. But one that I often turn to is he's an author and businessman from, I think, the early 1900s, named William Shedd. Mm-hmm. And his quote was, "A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are built for." So it's a reminder that we must always boldly go and be a little bit of Captain Kirk, of the enterprise, and go out on the limb a little bit, and not be afraid to shake it and not be afraid to step out of our comfort zones, whether, it be our brand or on behalf of a client's brand, and push them to be better, to go further, to reach higher, and not stay in harbor, but to take out to open water and see what's out there. So that's one of my favorite quotes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ed Delia of Delia Associates, for being with me today. I really appreciated your time, this conversation. It's really evident you have this calm aura where you can tell but you have this passion for your subject matter. And so that's a great mix. And I'm sure it serves your organization, your employees, your clients really well, and yourself. And I've just really enjoyed this conversation and unveiling a little bit more about brand for B2B and what people need to be thinking about, and that authenticity and living. Everything that you do should be based on what your brand is. So
thank you so much. I did, in all honesty, I did take my meds before I got on the call, so I'm a little mellowed out, but I appreciate it. And thank you. You've been a delightful host, and you ask great questions. And it's been a pleasure to be with you, Amika. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thanks to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode. I'll be back again with another amazing expert to share their story with you and help you on your path to business. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.